All right. Welcome to Hash It Out, hosted here by Virtru. Today, I'm joined by Joel Bilheimer from Pexip, who's the CISO of Pexip Americas, and I am Shannon Vaughn. I'm the general manager of Virtru's federal practice. Joel, good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you too, Shannon.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a fun conversation today. So, title of today's conversation is on secure collaboration and multi-domain operations. We will definitely get to that. I think, where this conversation first started was, we kept finding ourselves in the same room over and over, found out we had a lot of similar customers and prospects. And what they realized is it really was a better together story. So, Virtru, we're a data-centric security company that offers a platform that you can serve up data in a truly ZT manner. Pexip, I'll let you describe, but the way that I think about Pexip is it's a very sexy, quick, easy, clean interface for doing unified communications. But I'll let you do it. You work for Pexip.
I'm gonna forward that over to our marketing department because that's gorgeous. Yeah, so Pexip, we are a video conferencing company. We are mostly a business to business or business to government company. We tend not to focus on the consumer side, which is probably why most of your viewers probably haven't really heard of us. But if you are in, government communications, certain specialized industries, military, financial, healthcare that specialize on highly secure video conferencing, then you probably have actually heard of us. If you've been around the industry, we were actually born out of one of the splits from the Tandberg Cisco merger way back in the day. One group branched off and formed a different company, and then this group formed about 12, 13 years ago. So one of the things that sort of sets us apart, we are entirely software-based. Video conferencing traditionally tends to be hardware-based, and then there's sort of a cloud portion of that. But we've always been entirely software-based, and so we can deploy into, for example, air-gapped environments, which is pretty unique in the industry. And of course, we can hyperscale, Azure, AWS, Google, Oracle, whatever you want. So that's who we are. That's what we're a Norwegian company. I am based in the U.S., so I will say y'all, and I do not apologize for that. So just to follow on what Shannon's been saying, we've been working with Virtru for a couple of years now, I think, and we're really excited by that collaboration and what we can continue to do.
So I do find it interesting. Both of us have customer bases on both sides of the Atlantic and kind of elsewhere. You're focused on this side. I am as well. Your guys' U.S. headquarters is in Herndon, Virginia. We're in downtown Washington, D.C. So tell us, what is that differentiation? What is your role within the Pexip Americas team, and what is that traditional target market?
Yeah, so my official title is that I'm the CISO, but essentially that just means I'm the guy that gets brought into all the meetings to talk about security, and more specifically, why you should use us as opposed to something else. I'm the guy that hopefully gets over the hurdles. And I'm sure you can relate to that kind of situation. My answer is always, when talking about these things, I always like to say that security is not actually a hurdle, because I've been in government, I've been an ISSO and an ISSM. I always saw my role as not saying no, but trying to figure out how to get to the right yes. And that's what I try to do now, and that's what we as a company try to do. We try to get you to the right yes. That typically would mean a customer base that is focused more on frameworks, that is compliance, GRC, those types of things where there are certain baseline requirements that must be met. And then there are certain requirements that can be met in a number of different ways. And sort of working through that, figuring out what makes the most sense, whether that's a policy decision, whether that's an application layer issue, whether that's something that can be handled by a network situation that we don't necessarily deal with, but we work with. And I know that that's a lot of what you guys tend to focus on too, is trying to parse out what makes the most sense in terms of allocating those types of resources, both internally and externally.
Yeah, I think that is spot on. I think the other thing that both of our companies align on is that we are security companies at the end of the day, but as our CEO likes to say, we're almost a user experience company. And the reason why is I've never met an end user that likes doing added layers of security, right? Nobody likes doing the extra clicks. What we want to do is we want to get into your existing workflows and make them secure, right? So unified communications is obviously what you guys do in your bread and butter. How do you make that a seamless, actually, I'll frame it a little differently. How do you make it seamless specifically within a air-gapped environment, a customer like that who doesn't really expect them to be able to have a good user experience while operating at a much higher security classification than they're probably used to?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And obviously different customers will meet you at different points on that spectrum, right? There's some that they want to build their own solution, their own front end, their own back end, and that's great and fine. You just use this as an engine, slot us in. I think probably to be honest, I don't think that is the majority of our customers aren't really there. They want us to meet them sort of in the middle at the very least. And of course, we do have some that just want a SaaS type offering, which obviously isn't necessarily air gap, but we do have, for example, a FedRAMP offering and that kind of thing. And we do operate in sovereign clouds. But we understand those environments, right? So, in some cases, we come from those environments. So traditional things, whether those are application issues, whether they're business logic issues, we try to push as far towards the customer space as possible. So for example, things like licensing. Licensing can be a real problem in an air gap environment when it's day 366, but the mission hasn't ended. That kind of thing. So coming up with sort of creative ways to deal with that kind of problem, as well as, of course, the technology that we're using. So one of the things that we figured out a long time ago is we are never going to be able to answer every one of those questions, right? We can, put the technology together and the engine is rock solid and the interface is great and all those things, but there will always be, for example, a permission stack that we won't have visibility to. And this is obviously as you very well know, these are the conversations you and I have had many times. Yep. So one of the things that our basic architecture incorporates is a notion of both internal and external policy hierarchy. And that, I won't say that was before John Kindervag created Zero Trust, but it aligns with that timeline. Because that was just an architectural decision that the people who created the company or created the technology said, we can either build something that answers all these questions, or we can let the customer make those decisions. Yep. And by pushing it off, it opens us up to so many more possibilities, yep. Right? Because we can start to introduce layers of granularity, of access, of compartmentalization for mission-based issues, things like that on our own we would not be able to create. Yep. But by combining with Virtru, and sort of obviously possibly educating customers on what they can do, then that turns the art of the possible of our engine into something that really sort of flowers and becomes a much more integrated component to the overall communication or even business mission. Because one of the things that we see is we don't see ourselves as just a video conferencing company. We see ourselves, because too often, and not just in our technology, in any application layer technology, it's here's my widget is the best, now go deal with my widget and maybe my ecosystem, but my ecosystem doesn't talk to your system. My ecosystem isn't integrated. My widget, sits out here and you have to figure out how that works. We didn't want to do any of that. We wanted to slide in and be completely seamless, completely visible. So, if you've got, if you're using Microsoft Teams, for example, or, you're using Zoom or Google or something like that, or you have a platform that you've built because you're a healthcare organization, or, you're still using physical endpoints because you're a military organization, that's all fine. We can, however you want to deal with all that, should be to the end user completely seamless, because, regardless of what form of communication we're using, we're sharing data, right? And the mission isn't going to slow down. So the technology that provides you the ability to do that should not slow you down.
Yep.
And so that's where, being able to take, for example, some of the things that you guys are doing and say, yes, you don't have to change your platform for us. You just use us as yet another tool in your box, and we can make some really cool things happen. So I don't know if you want to have any thoughts.
I think that's where our two companies that have come together is being able to leverage a unified comms capability that our common customer bases are using, Pexip, and then a data security platform under the hood called Virtru, and being able to centralize policy decisioning, for one, right? So being able to have a common ABAC engine, right? Being able to leverage zero trust data format or ICTDF to be able to make determinations on who or what should get access to that resource or that piece of data, right? A feed has been really cool. What I would say is, I think it's more cool as we look into the mission partner environment space, and the partners and allies space, right? Because you and I both come from similar backgrounds, in the government, and it's always cool to say, hey, I'm at agency A and I can talk to agency B. I still remember that day and said, wow, that was actually fairly seamless, and it happened to be on a Tamberg system, believe it or not. What I will say is, it's gotten much cooler where you can actually say, hey, I'm going to go out and talk to my Five Eyes partner or my other NATO alliance partner, right? Because as I like to always remind people, if you go and read at least U.S. service doctrine and some of our Five Eye partners, their service doctrine, they've all started to say the same thing. All future fights are joint fights. And that's not just Army and Marine Corps coming together. That's the United States and Great Britain coming together, right? And so we have to be able to bring capabilities together to allow them to do what you just said, operate at the speed of war, right? Because that mission is not going to slow down. But I don't know, if you want to talk about that.
Absolutely, and I'm totally in agreement with you. That's the most exciting or interesting thing about where the technology is going, and hopefully where the policies are able to catch up to where the technology is going. But yeah, so for example, we've got situations where in a Five Eyes type of an environment, in an Allied Europe type of environment, where a given mission may have, let's say, I don't know, 7, 8 different national boundaries that are coming in to discuss that mission. For when we are sharing that information, whether that's in planning, whether it's actual kinetic sharing, that kind of thing, everyone needs to be able to instantly do what they need to do, communicate to whom they need to communicate, whether that's a war room style thing or an ops center, or you're bringing in human or whatever it is you're doing. But then as soon as that mission is over, you need to be able to ensure that national boundaries are still respected, that mission boundaries are still respected. So that's the flip side of the joint environment, right? It's not everything to everywhere all at once. It's everything everywhere when I need it, or what I need where I need it is probably a better way to say it. And so a lot of ZT today, and I really, really want to hear your thoughts on this. A lot of ZT today, to me, is, well, I put this device in, I checked the zero trust box, and now I have zero trust. And it's like, that's not actually how that works. Because what we're trying to do is say, okay, fine, you've done that at maybe a network layer. That's great, good start. Or maybe you've done that on your desktops. Fine.
Sure.
But we need to now start to get to the way that we actually communicate as human beings. It's talking, it's looking, it's maybe typing into a chat room, but being able to have all of those different things integrated and synchronized so that it's not just attribute-based access control, it's mission-based access control, where this conversation today is parsed at one level. Tomorrow, maybe it isn't. I've still got access to other things that are my normal baseline, but that, I'm not part of that mission anymore. Or, maybe we're going to bring in a new ally. Okay, well, now we're going to elevate them so that they can do what they need to do, but they're not participating in other conversations. So that's what's really exciting to me. But again, welcome your thoughts.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to that, right? So one of them for me is let's get rid of lazy data spillage, right? So just because I was read onto a program, 3 months ago because I had need to know, well, oh, sorry, the person forgot to read me off, I can still access that thing. Well, that shouldn't happen, right?
Yeah.
You should be able to plan against that. And that's one of the things that, Virtru platform does very well. The second side to that is, I like to say, I think there's two ways that communication happens. There's file-based communication, right? And this is a little bit of a Virtru plug, but Virtru data security platform, we've got email, SharePoint, Windows desktop. Those are all file-based. Hey, I'm going to create a thing. I'm going to drop it into a SharePoint repo, or I'm going to drop it into a S drive or email it off to somebody. And then there's real-time communication. And I think that's chat,
synchronous and asynchronous.
Yep. Yeah, that's unified comms. Here's why this relationship works so well, because the fastest way to get past that data spillage issue that I talked about in the first half is don't allow people to receive an email with somebody on the to line and go, oh, I didn't know they were read into Project X-Ray. So then they pick up the phone and they call the guy and say, hey, you're in Project X-Ray. Guess what? You have a data spillage moment, right?
Right.
So you have to realize that there's really two different ways that people communicate, and you need to be able to protect in a data-centric way both of them, right? That's how you can enable mission while reducing, data spillage. So I'll get up my soapbox.
That's the exact reason why, even though we have a Pexip and Virtru, but Pexip has a pretty good zero trust story to tell. I'm not a zero trust company. I don't build that, but I also don't want to be the barrier to that. I don't want, what I want to be able to do is take what Virtru is doing and say, yep, here's our APIs, let's build that out. Let's put in what you need, to start parsing that on, say, a per participant basis. Fine. So that it's not just, well, I'm a member of a company or a business unit, and therefore I get all this stuff access. No, like we can actually get literally down to, are you allowed to have this conversation at this particular time from this particular location using that particular device? Like we can do all of those things, right? And so, but it's not me doing that. It's Virtru. But I'm making your life easier, and obviously we're making the customer's life easier by essentially saying, the same policies that govern email or your SharePoint drop or whatever that is. Those are the exact same policies that govern who you can talk to in a synchronous or a real-time environment. And, I don't think that is, shrinking. I think that's growing. I think, we are moving more towards, whether that's, holographic, AR, VR type situations down the road. But I think, real-time is going to become much more prevalent even than it is today, which is a little bit, for an old guy like me, that's a little bit difficult to conceive of. But, so that's where I like to think we're at the beginning of this process. So.
No, I think you've said it well. It kind of gets back to actually what I said earlier. we're both user experience companies at the end of the day that do security things, right? But we do have to roll here. I told him we'd only go about 15 minutes or so. But last words, what do you think is next up for Pexip? Where are you guys going? Besides NATO Edge, we'll be at NATO Edge with you guys. But where are you guys going as a company? What's the next kind of machinations in probably?
So obviously, kind of the big story that any technology company has right now is, what are you doing with AI? Yep. We have a really great partnership with NVIDIA, where we are starting to explore. We actually don't tend to focus on things like generative AI because it doesn't mean much to us.
Yep.
We're using more analytic AI. So kind of where we're starting is things like live translations into, again, this is something that does impact allied environments, for example, where you've got native language on both sides, and native accent, or something like that. Yep. But again, with those same mission controls, those same access controls that we're just talking about. So that's kind of like vanguard, but it is where we are now. But we're also looking at maybe expanding some of that into, for example, deepfake technology or anti-deepfake technology, detection, using the engines that we've created both as processors, but also as sensors, so that there's this recursive, maybe continuous analysis, continuous assessment, confidence concepts, as you're very familiar with in the ZT world. Yep. So yeah, some really interesting concepts that we're sort of playing around with there, and really excited about some of the direction that might go.
Yeah, I think smart companies are starting to look at how do you plan for the future. We've got some very fun things that I think you'll see released fairly soon around secure analytics and confidential compute and some other stuff like that. Cool. But I think that'll be for a future hash it out. But Joel, I want to say thanks for coming on here today. As always, it's great chatting with you, and I look forward to the next time we catch up.
Absolutely. Always great to talk to you, Shannon. We'll see you at NATO.
All right, buddy.